they were having the premiere. And Jackie was like begging Samo to come. He's like, you got to come. It's going to be awesome. Like, you have to come. And Samo was like, I don't know, I'm like busy, or like I'm making some movie. I like kept making excuses, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, Samo was like, okay, fine, I'll come, whatever. So Jackie puts him like right in the middle of the theater, right? Like prestigious, because he's his big brother, and he like brought him into the industry, and he's like known him his whole life, whatever. And the opening scene plays, and then the credits start, and Samo just stands up and is like, well, that was fun, and he walks out.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Disconnected. I'm here with Will, who is the man behind the Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. And this is like 14 years in the making, it feels like.
Yeah, I feel I have to apologize because we tried to do this, like 5 times, and I kept canceling. So
don't. We both got kids. Life happens. Yeah. I mean, even right now, my kids got me sick. I'm not feeling 100%, but I'm making it happen for you. Because where there's a will, I'll find a way.
There's a way.
Will is like the ambassador on YouTube for all Hong Kong cinema, and then that has now morphed into this fairly active Facebook group that I joined a couple years ago, and I've watched your stuff for a long time. First of all, just share what the channel does and what got you here to begin with, because I'm sure you didn't see this coming with like your goal stated earlier in this year that you would have more subscribers than the university you work at.
Yes, so my partner in my channel, I should give him a shout out too. My friend Mike, he does all the behind the scenes stuff. So he like edits everything, and he does like audio correction and all this stuff that I would have no idea how to do.
Right.
So we make the content together basically, but he and I he follows very closely like how YouTube channels grow, because he's like really interested in like monetizing like that kind of stuff, and I'm just kind of like, just talk about movies. So he's like the business mind kind of, and so he was talking to me about subscriber goals, and we were kind of just joking about it, and we were like, well, what if we had more subscribers than our employer, because we both work at a university, so that became our like joking subscriber goal. But how I ended up on YouTube and how what the channel does. So I think I have the longest channel name on YouTube, Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, which was originally a joke because there is no society. Like it was a joke that it would appear as though it was more people than just me. But I started the channel really. I don't know. There's like the long version and the short version of the story. Which one do you want?
We're all about tangents on this channel, so let's dive deep.
You want to go really deep? Okay.
Let's go deep.
So if really deep, here's the full story. So I went to film school, right? And my friend Mike was a classmate of mine in film school. And after film school, we did a lab program with Film Independent, which is like an organization in LA that supports independent cinema. And they do like film festivals, and they do the Independent Spirit Awards, which people have maybe heard of.
Nice. So
we were accepted into one of their lab programs. And at the end of it, I got a grant for like, I think it was like $4,000, $5,000 to make a pilot for a web series I was working on with a friend of mine. So Mike was like a producer on it, and he also we wrote a part for him in it because we deliberately wrote the pilot so we wouldn't have to. I don't know if you've ever worked with like amateur, I don't know what you would call them, actors who aren't really actors, right? But like, it's actually a lot easier to just hire your friends and kind of like coach them than it is to like try to find actors, right? So we basically wrote this pilot for our friends, and we shot it, and it was the whole thing. And we were kind of like just frustrated by lack of resources, but also kind of coming to like a better understanding of the fact that like, why would, we would write this material and we would, try to make it. We thought it was really good, but then it's like, why would someone give us a ton of money to make something? They don't know who we are. They don't know if we're talented, right? So I was kind of like having this crisis of like, well, what should I do? Because no one's going to give me money to make anything, and I don't have any money. So a friend of mine who's a movie producer invited me to a film festival, right? in New Hampshire. So I flew all the way across the country for this film festival. And she introduced me to these producers of independent films, and I was like pitching some of my scripts to them. And one of the women, actually, one of the producers at the lunch actually said to me, well, the first thing you need to do is raise between $100,000 and $500,000 from your family as your like starting fund. I'm like, okay, so not only do I have to be well connected, I have to be rich too in order to do this, is what you're saying to me, right? But while I was at that lunch having this like revelation that I'll never be a filmmaker or whatever, right? A text comes in to my friend's phone, the friend who invited me there. And she turns to me and she goes, they just greenlit a remake of A Star is Born on the back of Lady Gaga's Instagram following. Like, they looked at how many Instagram followers she has, and they were like, that's however many millions of free eyeballs for this movie.
Yep. Here's
$20 million. So I was like, oh, so if I'm a social media star, I can be a filmmaker. So this is like, literally, this is why the channel. So I went to my friend Mike, and I was like, why don't we start a YouTube channel and like do Instagram and stuff like that? And Mike is like, like one of the great things about Mike is that he's just like, yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. He's like, he'll just do yeah, exactly. Yeah. So obviously then you have to figure out, well, what the hell am I going to do? Like, what's my channel going to be? Right. So we knew we wanted to do movies. And so it was just kind of like, well, and we also had a discussion of like, does Mike want to be in front of the camera? Because we had another channel that was called Terrible Infant, where Mike and I would review movies together. And I was doing kind of the Hong Kong stuff on the side because I loved Hong Kong movies and I just wanted to talk about them. And then the pandemic happened and I was stuck at home. And so I couldn't record with Mike anymore. And I was watching tons of Hong Kong movies and I would just set up my phone. Like, my kids would go to bed. I would go like in the corner of the apartment far enough away that I wouldn't wake them up by talking to the camera. Right. And just record all these movie reviews and Blu-ray reviews, which was never like, originally I wasn't interested in doing that type of content.
Right.
And then it just started doing by my standards, obviously I'm not like, I'm not Mr. Beast, right? But like, by my standards, it started doing well.
You don't have as many followers as Lady Gaga yet?
I'm getting there. I'm so close. But we also got lucky timing wise, because our Instagram account was like growing right when they first introduced the longer format videos, where you could do like 60-second videos or like 90-second videos. And I had like hundreds of clips from Hong Kong movies that I had cut because I was like going to put them somewhere. And then all of a sudden Instagram was like, you could put them here. And I just started dumping them. And we started that's when our Instagram account started adding a lot of followers, because we started getting huge numbers of views. Because at that time, the algorithm was really pushing the videos, because they were trying to take people from video apps onto Instagram, basically, right? And now they're doing the reels because they're trying to compete with TikTok. But so part of it is just lucky timing, but also Lady Gaga, I guess.
Basically, this is the story of how a Will is born.
Exactly. Yes. In the ashes of Lady Gaga's supernova, I was forged in the cosmos.
Yeah, it's a weird time. I've not witnessed it because I'm not in LA or trying to be an actor, but supposedly they have these. I've heard it referred to as a clout score or whatever, where they basically add up all of your followers from certain apps, and then they do some sort of again, like it's some sort of algorithm manipulation to that, and it spits out a score, and it basically tells the execs if this is somebody worth investing in, which is crazy.
It's like so. I don't know as much about the acting side of it, but my job before my current job was I worked at a website, and they own, like, the website itself is called Ranker, which is like ranking things, not Rancor from Return of the Jedi, the monster, because people do get confused on that point.
Thanks for specifying.
Yes. So Ranker owns all these brands, right? So like Weird History. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's like a brand that they own, right? So a lot of people don't know that that's part of Ranker, right? So what they do is they create all these brands, and then they do that, like they have a partner person who works at Facebook who helps them build audiences, and like, so I learned a lot about how social media works from them. But one of the things that I learned working there is that, I think like some people think, well, if I have the most number of subscribers, that's the best, or if I have the most followers, but it gets so granular with like, they'll figure out how many of your followers are bots versus real people. Then they'll look at, what the income level is of your followers, because they're finding out their purchasing power, right? Then they get the biggest metric really for how valuable you are to advertisers is engagement, right? So like the number of comments you get, right? So then they get even more granular, and they're like, okay, so they're getting comments from these people. Do these people have income, disposable income? And if so, what are they spending it on? And it's interesting because I actually have, for my size of following on my YouTube channel, I have very good engagement. But and people ask me why that is. Like I've had a channel once with 25,000 subs emailed me and said, "How do you have so many comments on your videos?" And I honestly, I don't know, but I respond to the comments.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. It's like people say something, and then I'm like, "Oh yeah, I really like that movie." Or like, to me, it's not about like the numbers. It's just cool to meet, like, for instance, I never would have met you if I wasn't doing this channel. So that's like, that's more interesting to me than the numbers game, because again, like, not to, harp on like the biggest names in the business, but like, unless you're someone like Mr. Beast, you're not like rich from YouTube. I mean, Logan Paul, whatever, like I'm probably never going to be those people. So why should I try? Like, it's more fun to just meet people and talk to them.
Exactly. I love the misconception some people have about that, because I joked recently, but this is absolutely true. I had somebody, they saw that I had like 1,100 followers a year plus ago, and they were like, "Oh man, are you getting close to being able to quit your actual job to be able to do YouTube?"
Someone asked me that recently too.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a real thing. I would need like 100 times plus at least at that point.
And or I guess like, some people do like the really aggressive merchandising where they sell like, and we had a web store for a while, but it's like one of those things where it's like, so you can go the route of like Redbubble. Is that what that website is called?
That's one of them, yeah.
So Redbubble, I did a lot of research on this because I'm like too anal about things. And Redbubble and like those other print on demand sites, what they do is they subcontract local printers. They produce the material and send it out, and there's no oversight basically. Yep. So like if you get a good printer, the shirt is awesome, but if you don't, it's crap. And I'm like, I do not want to deal with angry client, whatever you call them, customers, right? Like, it's not who I am. I don't have that. Like, I don't want to deal with that. So I went with Printful, which is this company where they actually own and monitor all of the printers, but you have to pay to have the store and like all this stuff. And it's like, it's just more of a hassle than it's worth ultimately, I think. But
yeah, it's a lot. But either way, you've grown a couple different empires, and they are seemingly feeding off of each other. And I say that because, like you said, the engagement is there. The community is present, and with a lot of people, that's not a given. I mean, there are channels like you just alluded to with 50,000 plus subs that get less comments than you do on half of your videos easily. And I'm even a quarter of the size of you probably, and I get a lot of comments as well. And when you start engaging that community and people realize there's knowledge and passion behind it, they just feel at home, and it makes sense that you foster the environment that you have.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like going to the video store in a way, right? It's like the digital version of hanging out at the video store and talking to people. And the Facebook group, honestly, is like, I'm kind of amazed by what has happened with that, because I started that years ago. And like, I don't know if you've heard me talk about, I have talked about this before, like in the Facebook group, but for like, I would say the first 18 months that it existed, it was like me and my brother and my cousins. And like I basically asked my family and friends to join. So there were people in there. And there were like a couple strangers who found it. But for a long time, I would post maybe once a week and there was nothing in there. And then all of a sudden it became like a big thing. Well, it's not big, but it's like what made me really happy was when it reached the point at which I didn't have to be the person like provoking conversation.
Right.
Like people just go in there and they have their own conversations. And that was kind of what I was hoping for in the first place. Basically just like to facilitate the space rather than have to be like the figurehead kind of thing.
And nowadays we got people like Brandon Bentley and Frank Jang and
Yes.
Mike Leader and Arna Venema all commenting and sharing, hey, we're on this release, you should listen to it, and recounting glory days of seeing something in, downtown San Francisco. And I love some of the stories that they share.
It's so, and I have to say, like, one of the things that I love about the Hong Kong cinema scene, I mean, I guess specifically with regards to, like, obviously I'm not hanging out with Jackie Chan, but like, like the people you mentioned, right? Like, everyone is so nice.
Yeah.
And so welcoming. And like, I have tried to be a part of like a lot of what we call it scenes in my life. Like I'm a big music fan. I used to go to like a lot of local like punk shows and hardcore shows. And like, I always wanted to be like one of the cool people, but like, I never got along. Like I could never become friends with the people in the scene.
Yep.
And I was kind of astounded by how friendly, like when I interviewed Arna Venema, he just started messaging me and then was like, hey, we should do an interview. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, you want me to interview you? Like, I was kind of shocked. And like the way I met Rick Myers and then also Frank Jeng was through FJ DeSanto, who's, I don't know if do you know who he is?
Yep. He got announced on a commentary with Frank just like a week ago. I think.
He started doing commentaries with Frank. So he produced the Transformers show on Netflix.
Yeah.
And he produced like a Shane Black movie. Like he's like a legit producer who now is like, he loves Hong Kong movies. Like he told me that he met Jackie Chan when he was like 14 at an Armor of God screening in like Chinatown, New York City or something like that. Yeah. But he just started messaging me out of the blue when I started doing the channel because he's been a fan of the movies for so long. And he put me in touch with Rick Myers and he put me in touch with Frank Jeng. And like everyone is just so like kind and welcoming and open to talking to you. And it's really kind of amazing to me that everyone is so nice. So it's been great. Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, I had Big Mike Leader and Arna Venema on together on my channel, and it was still like one of the most fun conversations I've ever had. I swear, if Mike didn't have to go somewhere that day, I think we might have talked for like 4.5 hours.
I've interviewed Arna twice, and I love it because I barely have to say anything.
Yep.
Like he's got so much to say and he's like so excited. And I'm like, oh, tell me about this movie. And then he'll just talk for like an hour. And I'm like, this is so cool. And Mike Leader is, I've never interviewed Mike Leader because the time difference is such a pain.
Yeah. Between
LA and Hong Kong, it's like 16 hours, like something weird where like I interviewed Simon Wilson, who's in Hong Kong, he played the vampire in the movie Vampire's Breakfast. And nice. I had to get up at like 4 a.m. because that was like the only time he had available. So with Mike Leader, like we've tried a bunch of times and the timing is it just doesn't work, but he's so friendly too. Like the other day, he just sent me like some random message. I don't remember what it was on Instagram. He's really funny. That's what I like about Mike Leader. Like he just like randomly sends me this really funny stuff. Yeah. So yeah, but it's just so cool to be able to talk to these people and even just to talk to you. I mean, this is so much fun. Like it's better than working right now, right?
Exactly. Completely agree. I just recently changed my schedule so I could have Fridays off to be able to do something like this. And it's worked out so well to, be able to have a bunch of discoveries and just make new contacts and friends. And one of the things that people have been trying to look into recently is all of this Hong Kong cinema suddenly get releasing, and
it's crazy. Yeah.
Many people have never even dove in, so it's kind of like intimidating to a point.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's the same way to me because it's like the vaults are really opening now, right? Yeah. And you're like, so many movies that had been hard to find for so long, and now they're there, and it's like, what do I even watch at this point? Because there's like so much happening. But it's been amazing. I guess this is another thing where I think I'm really lucky that I kind of just coincidentally started my channel when this big wave of releases started happening. Like I was kind of relatively new to doing Hong Kong stuff when 88 Films put out Crime Story, The Protector, and Miracles, right? And so I just messaged them on, I think it was on Instagram. And I asked them if they had any promotional stuff that I could share, like images or information about what was on the releases. And they were like, why don't we just send you the releases? And I was like, oh, okay. And so I reviewed them, and people like responded really well to the reviews, and then those releases sold really well, and then more releases started coming out, and it was like this snowballing thing. But that's, I mean, like I said with the Instagram thing, where it just so happened that I was on Instagram with all these videos when they introduced the video thing. Like it was just a total coincidence that I happened to be doing this channel when all these releases started coming out. So,
and the crazy thing, literally like 3.5 years ago, there was pretty much no Hong Kong cinema coming out on Blu-ray from anybody, let alone, nowadays there's genuine competition. We have multiple labels focusing on Hong Kong cinema, it feels like. And you could name a title and go, yeah, one of these 5 labels could put it out and I wouldn't be surprised.
And I even found out this week, I don't think I'm allowed to tell the behind the scenes details of it, but there's fighting over titles now between labels. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard stuff like that too, because you talk to the same people I do. Yeah, but that's really interesting to hear about too, and like the behind the scenes drama and like the label wars and stuff like that. I mean, I use that term facetiously. It's like the label wars, but like, it's just funny to me. Yeah.
The crazy thing, and for everybody that has not talked to these people, I get the impression that all of like the dramatics of this, it really occurs up until somebody signs that contract, and then they're super supportive of each other. Oh, you're going to do great. I'm glad you're putting it out.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it's not really competition. It's not like 88 Films putting something out is going to make Error 4444 not be able to release something else. So they're just stoked that we're going to have the movie.
Yeah, and I think, and I totally agree with that point, and also I think that the bigger labels like Eureka 88, and I mean Criterion's even doing Hong Kong stuff now too, right? I mean, obviously they did in the past because they put out Hard Boiled and The Killer on Laserdisc, right? Like way back in the day, they have I'm not allowed to say what. I'm sure you've heard this too, but Criterion has recently acquired some big Hong Kong movies that I think they're going to be announcing soon. So that's really exciting. But I think with the big labels putting out, Jackie Chan and whatever, and having success, that these smaller labels like Error, is it 4444 or is it 4444? I don't know how to pronounce it. How do you say it?
They told me that either one is correct, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't help. Yeah. Now I'm even more confused. Okay. Error 4 to the 4th power. Yeah. And then there's an other new label that's doing out the Butterfly Kill movie.
Neon Eagle Video.
Yes, Neon Eagle. Yeah, I pre-ordered that movie. Because the bigger labels I think are doing so well, then these smaller labels there's the marketplace for them to be able to put out the lesser known films, which I think is really cool, and it creates this kind of like self-supporting ecosystem.
Absolutely. And the fact that they are still doing so well kind of proves this was literally just an untapped market, and all the more power to them, because if we can keep doing this, we have some of these deep cuts, and they can, as long as they can secure the rights and the elements are there are things that they can release for years and years.
Oh, I know there's so much that they can be putting out, and it's I almost think of it as like because one of the things that I talk to people about when I talk about why this boom is happening right now, obviously part of it is technology, and there's like Blu-ray and 4K and all this stuff, right? But the people who grew up watching these movies are now of the age that they have enormous nostalgia for them, and they have the money to buy them. And so it's like a perfect kind of market if you look at like the economics of it. And it almost kind of reminds me of like 20, 30 years ago, whenever that was, when the classic Japanese movies from the 50s and 60s and even the 40s were coming out like in huge volumes, and people were buying those all up, because at that time the people people like George Lucas and Coppola and Spielberg used to go see those movies in theaters. So they were of the age at that point in time when they wanted to see them all again and stuff like that. So it's cool to be kind of just at the right time for this to be happening.
Yeah, and now you got things like The Untold Story coming out from Unearthed Films and making waves. We even have Ebola Syndrome in 4K. I never expected that.
Like, what? And I think Untold Story isn't there a commentary from the director on there? Like, there's good bonus material on those releases too,
I think there's a commentary from him on there, but the big thing is there's a Cat 3 documentary on there that's actually really well done. And I think the fact that came out fairly early in this whole cycle, a lot of people grabbed that because it was new and exciting. watched that documentary and went, oh, like there's an entire world that I've never been a part of. And that leads in perfectly to you are here to be able to guide people down some of these stepping stones. And with Hong Kong cinema, what are some of the titles that you think people should be going into first to really get a grasp and understand what they're getting into to see if they actually want to go deeper?
Yeah, so that one of the things that I find so interesting about this question, again, I mean, you said tangents are okay, so I'm a big tangent guy, but I'm looking at my phone because I actually made a list of movies in case I forgot like stuff I wanted to mention. But what's interesting about Hong Kong cinema is that, I mean, I guess you could say this is true of every cinema scene anywhere in the world. But when I think about Hong Kong cinema, I think about the fact that there's so many different paths you can go down, right? Of course. There's like the John Woo, Chow Yun-fat, Ringo Lam, like heroic bloodshed, shoot 'em up, like thriller type of movies. There's the Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung stuff. Then you have like the old school martial arts, Shaw Brothers, Bruce Lee, Jimmy Wang Yu, like that stuff. And then something that seems to be selling really well is the category 3 stuff, like you said, which is, that's really interesting to me because, you have these labels like Vinegar Syndrome that put out a lot of what I call trash movies. Yeah. And I don't I have to emphasize, I don't say that like in a derogatory way. That's just kind of how I think of them. They're like kind of trash movies, but I like those movies.
Exactly.
But there's like this huge market for people who really, because I don't know how you are, but it's hard for me to watch like really extreme movies. Like I couldn't finish Untold Story. I got to basically the end and I was like, nope, I can't watch the scene. I know what's going to happen and I can't watch it. But people love those movies and they're doing really well. And I think that's great for kind of fans in general, because then we get more of them.
Right.
So I'm just looking through my phone because I swear I wrote down. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So what I did was I thought, I'll recommend some movies by genre. Smart. Rather than just, because I did, like a lot of times when you ask people like, what should I watch? They're just going to be like, watch Hard Boiled, The Killer, A Better Tomorrow 2. It's like all John Woo movies, right? Or it's all Jackie Chan movies. So I was like, let me try to make it a little bit more interesting. So for Heroic Bloodshed, which is, if you're unfamiliar with what that is, and I'm probably not going to give the most precise definition because someone has actually, I didn't realize this until relatively recently. There's actually like a written down definition of Heroic Bloodshed movies somewhere in some book somewhere, right? But I think of it as like John Woo, basically, right? It's like movies about criminals and cops and codes of honor and brotherhood. And there's lots of gunfire and there's lots double fisting the pistols. Yeah, stuff like that. And Chow Yun-fat is in basically all of the best movies. So that's another way to think of it. It's the Chow Yun-fat genre. Yeah. So I went with City on Fire.
Nice.
I love that movie. I love Ringo Lam. And again, like I said, like everyone's going to see the John Woo movies anyway. I feel like maybe not, but they probably are. If you're thinking of not seeing the John Woo movies, go and see those. But apart from that, I think City on Fire is a great movie, and it was heavily influential on Reservoir Dogs. So that's something else people like about it because they can watch it and then recognize. It's almost like Reservoir Dogs is like it takes the last sequence in this movie and turns it into an entire film, basically. Yep. So
very
that's
accessible film for a lot of people, though.
Yeah, and and Ringo Lam and John Woo, I think, are good filmmakers for people who are coming from a Western perspective, if that's who you are, because they were influenced by Western films, right? So it's almost like Kurosawa. Like some people complain, like Kurosawa is a very Western Japanese filmmaker, but it's like, well, that's probably a good thing because then people who grow up watching Western films can watch his movies and then get into the Japanese movies where you're like, whoa, this is really out there.
Yeah. All of the best filmmakers, they need something to bridge that gap to other cultures, and Kurosawa's kind of perfect. It opens the door to a lot of things that people never would have had the opportunity to see, or probably never would have sought out unless they saw something that was at least sort of relative.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that there are people who disagree with like the big man theory of history or whatever you call it, but you could reasonably make the argument that Japanese cinema in that era would not have been successful in the US without Kurosawa.
Yep.
So I think it's essential. So comedy. Comedy is tricky because there's so many types of Hong Kong comedy, right? Yep. You have like the Wong Jing, like perv comedies, and then you have like the Jackie Chan comedies, and you have the more verbal, like the Hui brothers and stuff like that. So I went with Winners and Sinners, which is a Sammo Hung movie, which has Jackie Chan in it. And Yoon Bu is in it, and like the whole gang of people in it. And I love this movie. I think it's so funny. I love the premise of the movie is that there's 5 guys who go to jail together, and then they get out of jail and they start a company, like a cleaning company, where they go around cleaning people's houses. And then of course they end up accidentally cleaning, like they clean a criminal's house and like all this stuff happens. But the opening of the film shows you how they each went to jail and like the crimes that they committed. And they're like the stupidest crimes you can possibly imagine. And I love that kind of humor. I love really silly humor. And I think that Sammo and Jackie are really influenced by like old Hollywood humor.
Oh, absolutely.
So like, yeah, I mean, obviously the Three Stooges, right? Because they even reference them, but also like screwball comedies and like Howard Hawks and like stuff like Bringing Up Baby and things like that. And I think and the Marx Brothers, and which is like my favorite type of comedy. So
Buster Keaton for sure too.
Oh yeah. I mean with Jackie, yeah, like 100%. Yeah. And Harold Lloyd, is that the other? Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So I love that type of comedy. And so I think this is a really fun movie, and it does have, a really spectacular Jackie Chan stunt scene in it where he's on roller skates and he's like, going in between these cars and he goes underneath like a truck, and it's a really fun scene. So you get some fun action, but it's also a really silly comedy.
Nice.
So then old school martial arts movies, right? So this is where, I mean, the Shaw Brothers made like 1,000 movies, right? Like, how do you
just pick one, please?
How do you pick one? So I put down 2 because I cheated, and I put Avenging Eagle. Have you seen that movie? Yeah,
I have.
Yeah. I just love that movie so much, and to me that's like in a way the ultimate. It's hard to pick an ultimate Shaw Brothers movie, but I love that movie because it has like all of kind of the hallmarks of Shaw Brothers films, but it also does some really interesting stuff. Like the camera work is really interesting because in a lot of those old school martial arts movies, they just put the camera on the tripod and pointed it at the people, and it was just sat there, right? Yeah. Which is fine because the point is the fighting or whatever, right? But Avenging Eagle has some really cool camera work. It's a really fun movie. It's got totally ridiculous weapons, which is like such a hallmark of the Shaw Brothers movies, right? Like there's a guy who has sleeve knives where he attaches the knives to his sleeves, and he's just like, why don't you just hold them? Wouldn't that be easier?
Yep.
It's so good. But it has a really interesting narrative structure, which is very Tarantino-esque. So again, like with City on Fire, you see the Tarantino influence. Like I think if you were to watch Avenging Eagle, you would really see influence on Tarantino with like because the way Avenging Eagle works is you see like about 30 minutes of the movie, and then you go back in time and there's like another chunk of about 30 minutes. So it does like the chapter thing, kind of like Tarantino, and it sets up character motivation. And I think it does a really good job with that. But then the other thing I put down for old school martial arts is Chinese boxer, which I think is just absolutely essential. And Jimmy Wang Yu. And if I understand, I'm not like a historian of cinema by any means, but from what I understand, the Chinese boxer and like the early Jimmy Wang Yu films, and then moving from that, because this was this before Bruce Lee, or is it like right around the same time? Right? I think Jimmy Wang Yu was like a little bit before Bruce Lee.
I think he started right before,
Yeah. That was like the beginning of what we call kung fu films, right? Like, because previous to that, it was like wuxia films and like sword play and flying around and stuff like that. And then it became like these grounded, really violent movies that Jimmy Wang Yu would use a lot of cinematic techniques as opposed to the physical ability of the actor to show like the action, which I love watching his movies because the editing is fantastic. The way he shoots things, there's lots of really dynamic camera. They're like really bloody and kind of like the pitch of them is like so extreme that it's like, you're like, it's like listening to Slayer or something. You know what I mean? It's just like so much is coming at you that it's like amazing. And he's really influenced by Japanese films. So he also does use like silence to create tension. And he's just a great filmmaker. So I think everyone should see one of his movies. Okay, so then let's see what else I put on my little list here. Okay. So I have a category called WTF. Because to me, that's like a big component of Hong Kong films, right?
Yep.
You're watching it and you're like, wait, what am I watching? Okay, so I put Holy Virgin versus the Evil Dead. Have you seen this movie?
Yes. Thankfully, I was able to get the Golden Ninja video release.
Yeah, I forgot that they released it. Yeah, someone sent me, this is the weirdest thing. Someone reached out to me. This wasn't even that long ago. It was like maybe 5 months ago, 6 months ago. And they were like, do you want a laser disc rip of Holy Virgin versus the Evil Dead? And I was like, yeah. Like, A, why do you have that? Then B, yes. So And then I was reminded that Golden Ninja Video, right? Yeah, that they put it out, and it's just insane. It's insane. It's like Donnie Yen is like he's a professor, right? He's like a historian or something, and this insane supernatural creature murders all his students and like rips all their clothes off and stuff because he's like a pervert supernatural creature. And so Donnie Yen is like investigating this cult in Cambodia, and he's a professor, but he also happens to be like the world's greatest martial. He's Donnie Yen, but he's also a college professor, right? You're like, that doesn't really make sense, but I like it. And then they go to Southeast Asia, and it's like there's like shooting sequences with machine guns and all this stuff where like people are getting blown away, and then there's martial arts fighting sequences. There's a woman who uses a sword, so there's like sword fights in this movie. There's that amazing fight where one person has a sword and the other person is shooting exploding arrows at them, and you're just like, what's happening? It's like kind of a horror movie, and there's like enormous amounts of gratuitous nudity. But it's not rapey, I do have to point out, because a lot of the rapier Hong Kong films, I can't really, it's hard for me to go there. This one is not like that. They're just like, okay, let's just make everyone naked because people like looking at naked people. And then we'll make this, and it has like, it kind of reminded me of John Carpenter, like in that it has that like creepy, like slasher movie vibe. And like, so it's like 50 movies happening at once, and they all work. So I was like, yeah, this is awesome.
That's a wild one.
Okay, and then I have action comedy on here. That's interesting. I made this list a couple weeks ago, and now I'm looking at it, and I'm like, why did I separate comedy and action comedy? But I have two tiers, I do have to say. This is my first 5, and then I have a second tier of more obscure movies. Police Story. I mean, how can you not pick a Jackie Chan movie, right? And like, if you're new to Hong Kong cinema and you just want to watch something, like you have to watch Police Story, which, I mean, it's interesting. I get into arguments with people about this. Like, I might argue from a story standpoint that I like Police Story 2 more. And I think Police Story 2 has like amazing fights in it, like the playground fight and that restaurant fight. But the opening scene of Police Story and the closing scene of Police Story are like the greatest stunt sequences ever. Like the thing with the bus where he's hanging off the bus with the umbrella and he's walking across the tops of the cars. And like the first time I saw that, I was like, what is happening right now? This is amazing.
And without a lot of those scenes, they never would have been able to make the rest of the Police Story films. They were so influential and made such an impact that they were like, yes, please, here's more money. We need more. Yeah,
please, we need more. Yeah. And I think I'm like obsessed with thinking about the history of movies. And I think Police Story is such an important film because, you know, you can point to other movies that came out before it for what I'm going to say, right? And say, well, that was earlier. Like Yes, Madam, I think came out a couple weeks before Police Story. But Yes, Madam was not a huge international hit, right? But I think in a way, Police Story is like the birth of like what you would call the modern action film, in as much as it's martial arts, it's gunfighting, it's over the top stunts, it has comedy, it's like trying to be likable, right? It's like all of these things. And obviously like movies like Beverly Hills Cop came out first, and like the first Terminator movie came out before Police Story. And so like the action movies in the 80s were already happening. But if you look at like what an action film is now, I think Police Story is like, that's like, you know, ground zero for what that became. And it's so influential. It's almost like the first Halloween movie. Like you watch the first Halloween movie and you're like, I can't even see it as a movie. I can just see it as like the text for all horror movies. You know what I mean? It's
the foundation.
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, you have to see Police Story. So,
and now you can see it on beautiful 4K, and that's,
yes, the Eureka set, right?
Astonishing. It looks so damn good. That made multiple of my lists last year just for favorite things. That genuinely an astonishing release. And if you've not picked it up yet, obviously 4K region free, well worth it. Looks incredible. Yeah. And
I mean, there's a lot of good bonus features on that set too. And the thing that I love about Jackie Chan, and I get this too with Sammo Hung films, is that they're just so much fun. There's so much joy that you get from watching them. And there's like a million other movies I could point to and be like, this is a better film, you know? But like, it's not fun to watch. Like, whereas Jackie Chan movies, and he wants you to like it. That's the other thing that I really like about Jackie, is that he's in the entertainment business, you know?
He's a pure entertainer.
Yeah, he just wants people to be happy and watch the movies. And it's just, it's really fun. it made me think of if I could take a tangent. Telling you, for some reason, talking about Jackie and Sammo, someone told me this story about Sammo Hung that is one of like the funniest stories I've ever heard. I've heard a lot of funny Sammo Hung stories. I don't know if you've heard like behind the scenes stories about him, but they're just like hysterical. So apparently, with one of the movies that Jackie directed, I think it may have been Super Cop. They were having the premiere. And Jackie was like begging Sammo to come. He's like, "You got to come. It's going to be awesome. Like, you have to come." And Sammo was like, "I don't know, I'm like busy, or like I'm making some movie." I like kept making excuses, right? Yeah. And then finally, Sammo was like, "Okay, fine, I'll come. Whatever." So Jackie puts him like right in the middle of the theater, right? Like prestigious because he's his big brother, and he like brought him into the industry, and he's like known him his whole life, whatever. And the opening scene plays, and then the credits start, and Sammo just stands up and is like, "Well, that was fun," and he walks out. It's like he's like such a hog. I would love to that brazen just like, and he's just messing with him, right? Yep. It's just like so funny to me.
I still love I think it was what movie, I don't remember which one, but Mike Leader was telling the story about Sammo Hung advertised basically that he got hurt and had to spend like a week and a half in the hospital for some stunt that he did on some film. And they were at his house later interviewing him, like 25 years later. And as they're discussing it, Mike asked him about the injury. And his brother was in the house. And he goes, "Hey, I did that stunt." And everybody looked at Sammo and he was like, "What do you mean?" And it was just it was a big publicity thing. It was funny.
It's so funny. Oh, he's so funny. So another Sammo story I heard, not to just derail the conversation with Sammo stories, but at some point he broke his leg.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've heard this story, but he broke his leg and he decided that he wanted to, rather than get a wheelchair or get crutches or something, he had his stunt team carry him around like a king, like on one of those platform thrones, right? So he would have 8 guys with him at all times because he would have 2 teams of 4 in case they got tired. They were just carrying him around like a king on his throne. It's just like,
it's Hong Kong royalty for you.
Oh, it's so funny. I love it. Yeah. So should I keep going with my list, or should we talk about?
Yeah, let's go into some deep cuts because obviously by now a lot of people have seen some of the bigger ones. We've gotten some of the more mainstream-esque titles. A lot of people know John Woo. A lot of people know Sammo. A lot of people know Jackie. But a lot of those titles are underseen. A lot of those titles don't have releases yet. What are some that you're super passionate about and hoping that people dive into and enjoy?
And so one movie that I really love, and this is a heroic bloodshed film. It's called My Heart Is That Eternal Rose. There is a Hong Kong Blu-ray of this movie, and I think it's out in France, but I'm not 100% sure. And it's Tony Leung is in it, and nice. And Kenny B. Who do you know? Kenny B. He's in like what's that movie called? Millionaire Express. He's like in the beginning in the snow scene, and yeah, and he's also in. Very briefly, he's in Armor of God. I think he's like one of the members of the band that they're showing because he was a musician, right. And he became an actor. But anyway, it's kind of like a riff on A Better Tomorrow. It has a very similar structure where it opens and there's like this conflict between these people, and they're like, this guy's in love with this woman, and they're having like this nice life, but then they're involved in crime, and there's like a huge shootout, and the guy has to go away, and then all these years pass. And people kind of meet up again, much like in A Better Tomorrow, the T. Lung character goes to jail and he comes home and he finds everything is different and he's really sad. But it's like very similar to that, except instead of being about brothers, it's more of a romantic story. So it has kind of a Wong Kar-wai like aesthetic to it. And the guy who directed it is he was Wong Kar-wai's mentor. And so it's a very like romantic kind of whimsical movie, but it's also like a really good like shoot 'em up thriller. So I like that movie a lot. I really love that one. And the Hong Kong Blu-ray, I will say, if you know about Hong Kong Blu-rays, you'll know that the subtitles are like avant-garde, surreal. What would you call them?
A different language sometimes.
Yeah, where you're watching it, you're like, I get what's going on because I can see the movie, but I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, but the Hong Kong Blu-ray for that movie looks incredible. So, and it's not too hard of a movie to understand, just from watching it. I think Michael Chan is in that movie too. I think he might play the bad guy, who apparently he is an actual triad, and like for real, kind of a scary dude.
That happens a lot more than people think with a lot of these films.
I heard. Okay, I don't think I'm allowed to talk about this, but there was a. I'll say it without saying the name. There was a very, very successful Hong Kong actor, filmmaker, producer type of person who I never in a million years would have thought was like one of the triad people. And someone told me that this person was denied entry to Canada for a film festival because of triad ties.
Oh.
And I really don't want to say who it is because I don't think I'm supposed to. But I was like, and that really surprised me. And it was really interesting to learn. But yeah, you hear that stuff all the time. Where you're like, oh, I like that actor. And then you find out like, oh, that actor was. And here's a funny story. You may have heard this story before because Donnie Yen has told it in interviews. But Donnie Yen I guess he does not have like triad ties because he didn't grow up in Hong Kong, right? He like grew up in other places and he lived in Boston for a long time, I think. But because of the characters that he plays and because of the close ties between the Triad Society and the film industry, everyone assumes that he's like a criminal or whatever. So he told this story where he was like trying to park somewhere, and these like ruffian street punk like scary dudes were like they're trying to hold the parking spot for someone, and they were like trying to threaten him, and he just rolled down his window just to like try to talk to them, and they're like, "Oh, brother Donnie, we're so sorry, and they like ran off. Yeah.
Wow.
So anywho, yeah, that's another tangent. Okay, so what else do I have here? So now, see, I'm worrying that the movies I picked as like deeper dives are actually not that obscure, but I don't know. I'll just forge ahead with my list anyway, and hopefully it'll be good enough. So for Girls with Guns movies, which is a genre I really like, I picked Devil Hunters, which is, I think this is another one where there's like a French Blu-ray. I think that's like the main HD release of it. It's just a really good movie. It's like a really good scuzzy. The Girls with Guns movies are really interesting because they take the John Woo thing and they take kind of the Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung thing of like the urban modern combat movie, whatever you want to call it, right? And they stick it together, which is just really fun for me. But Devil Hunters is just a really good, I don't know if you call it a B movie, like it's grimy and it's a little bit trashy. It's really violent, but it's just really exciting and really fun. I think Alex Mann is in it, who for my money is an amazing. And Alex Mann plays, I should also shout out this movie, which I absolutely love. It's called Tragic Hero. Also, Black Vengeance, which is a Chow Yun-Fat film. So again, I didn't want to put it on my list because it's like I feel like if Chow Yun-Fat's in it, people are going to find it's like more of a well-known movie. But he plays the villain in that movie, and I just like that's like my favorite trashy Chow Yun-Fat heroic bloodshed movie. And I think Eureka's putting it out this year, along with Rich and Famous, which is the it's the prequel, but it came out after. So Rich and Famous and Tragic Hero were made at the same time. Rich and Famous goes first chronologically, but they released Tragic Hero first because it was more exciting. Yeah. So the producers saw both the movies and they're like, this one is way better. We're putting this out first. And then the audiences were like, this comes in like halfway through the story. Like, what's happening?
I would love to see Girls with Guns be like the next big focus on a lot of these labels.
And there's so many good movies in that, because I feel like in a way you can see trepidation from the labels with certain releases where like they put out Eastern Condors with 2 other movies on it, right? And it's like Eastern Condors would sell like gangbusters, but maybe like, well, I don't know if we trust these other, but just put them all together and see what happens, right? And then you have one of the ones that people were really upset about was Prodigal Son and Warriors 2 being a double feature, right? Because they just want Prodigal Son, and I'm like, well, Eureka probably knows that, and they put them together because they want you to buy both of them, right?
Absolutely.
But with the Girls with Guns movies, like some of them are so good that it would be just really awesome to see like a kind of a renaissance, and especially, I mean, it's the perfect timing because as far as I understand it, like the ground zero movie for Girls with Guns is Yes Madam, right, which stars Michelle Yeoh, who is nominated for an Oscar right now because of Everything Everywhere All at Once. She's having this huge career renaissance, and now, I mean, obviously Eureka and 88 are both putting out the In the Line of Duty movies, right? Which are the kind of Girls with Guns / adjacent. I don't know. It's the fourth one. Yeah, the fourth one is like more of a Donnie Yen movie, I think. Right? It's been a while since I've seen it, but it would be it's perfect timing, I think, and it would be awesome because there's so many like the Moon. I love the Moon Lee movies. Killer Angels is another one with Moon Lee that I really like, and that movie has like this kind of comedy thing where she has to like, if I remember correctly, she's going undercover to infiltrate like a gang or something, and they all hang out at this nightclub, so she has to pretend to be a singer to get a job at the nightclub. So there's like these comedy scenes where she doesn't really know how to sing, but she's trying to like be a singer to get into the club. I love that movie, and that's if I'm not mistaken, that's the movie where in the dub one of the bad guys' names is Jackie Chan. And they're like, we have to catch Jackie Chan. The first time I saw it, I was like, what's going on right now? Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. They do stuff like that all the time, and then a lot of the subtitles, like you said, when they are fixing these. I want to point out, we mentioned Frank Jang earlier. His work lately has been monumental in making these more understandable, making these more up to date with like giving actual context to these films. And shout out to all the people that do the commentaries on these releases, because like Frank is one of the best, in my opinion, with how you'll zoom in on something and see a location. And obviously with a lot of Hong Kong films, you're like, I've seen that in 4 different movies. But at that time, he'll give you the context of why it was important to be filmed here, what it means, what was happening in the area. And it gives you this like giant view surrounding the film that makes it so much better.
Yeah, I mean the cultural context, and the historical context that Frank brings, because he does subtitles for like a lot of these movies, and he also, I think that from what I understand, from what I talked to him about this, I interviewed him I think in like November, and we had dinner afterwards, and we were talking about this. There are some releases where he like reviews the subtitles. I don't know what you would call it. He's like he oversees the subtitle process to make sure that they're accurate. And so, I mean, the work that he does and the amount of like, I don't know if people know how much work Frank does, but I asked him recently if he ever sleeps, like jokingly. And his response was, I take naps. Like he doesn't sleep at night. He'll just sleep like 3 hours here, 4 hours there. Like it's one of his commentaries. I forget which one it is. I'm trying to remember, but I can't. He's speaking really quietly. And I asked him about that, and he was like, my wife was asleep. We were in a hotel, and my wife was asleep. And I had like a deadline, and I just recorded it on my phone. Like the amount of work that he does and the amount of detail. I mean, he takes like dozens of pages of notes, and he reads. Like for the Joseph Coe box set, when Eureka released that, Frank got like an out-of-print Chinese language book on Joseph Coe and like read the whole thing, so that he would know what to talk about. It's like his dedication to it is insane. Yeah. And it's,
I'm putting this up the same week as I'm putting up an interview that I did with Frank. And
oh, wow. Okay.
One of the first questions that I started the interview off with was, so do you still have like 7 jobs? And the amount of stuff that he does is crazy, because he's a full-time government employee. He works at a library. He does commentaries. He is married. He still like does vacations with his wife, like you just heard. There is so much that he is just always awake. It is impossible to live his life without that. It's
insane. And I actually met his wife the last time I interviewed him, and she's so mellow. And I'm like, I wonder if this is how he does it. He has this anchor. He has like this anchor of total calm, because he's kind of manic, which is like, I'm like that too. So they're like the perfect duo. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I mean, Frank and I mean, so many people do so much work on these. Like, I mean, you mentioned that Brandon Bentley was in my Facebook group. Like the amount of work that he does is completely insane. And like the audio for all these alternate cuts of the films. And like, I was very ignorant as to how much work it is. Like, he was talking to me, I think, about righting wrongs and how, like, there were multiple audio sources for that, and they were, I think they were like picking the best parts of each one, and then they had to stitch it together, and like, it's just insane. Yeah. So shout out to all those people. I don't know, should I keep going with my list, or should we talk about other stuff? I don't really
How many more do you got?
I got 3 on here.
I was waiting for you to say, like, 41.
Well, I only have 375 more. No, I only have 3 more.
Let's shout out the final 3.
Okay, so the Death Duel, which is the Chor Yun film, which, not to be confused with Duel to the Death, which is also an amazing movie with ninjas and decapitations and all that stuff. And then I put Prince Charming, which is a comedy from, I think, 1984, and Maggie Cheung is in it, and Sherry Chung is in it, Kenny B is in it, and I think it's a Wong Jing movie, and it's just like a really fun, like, 80s rom-com, but it has that Wong Jing, like, pervy sense of humor, so it's like a pervy rom-com.
Nice.
And that was actually on Netflix, I think, at some point last year. I don't know if it still is, but I thought that movie was great. And then I have The Longest Night, which is a movie that was released by Johnny To's company. According to some people, Johnny To was the co-director on it. According to other people, he was the producer, but he was like in charge in a way. So he would be like, he would come to the set. And from what I understand, the way that Johnny To's company worked, Milky Way, like in that kind of classic era from like 98 until like 2010 or whatever, is everyone was kind of doing everything. So they would write scripts together, and Johnny To, like, is the executive producer, but he's like on the set, and he's like, the movie's going to look like this. And then the director's like, okay, I'll do that kind of thing. You know, like, so what is his role really? But Tony Leung and Lau Ching-win, his name is Sean Lau, right? And so I've been calling him Sean Lau for like 10 or 15 years. And then I found out that, like, basically no one calls him that. It was just like a made up name for some Western release, right? So I think his name is Lau Ching-wan, who's an incredible actor. The two of them are both in that. And it's a very dark, violent movie about like crooked cops and very bad criminals. And so if you like darker thrillers, because like the John Woo movies, you know, they're not like, they're violent, but John Woo is very sentimental, right? Yeah. Like he doesn't make dark films in like a sadistic kind of like nihilistic way, maybe.
Well, and they're also very Hollywood films too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and The Longest Night is a little more nihilistic. So if that's kind of more your cup of tea, I think that would appeal to you more than like a John Woo movie would.
That makes sense. All right. Was that the last one?
That was the last one.
Jeez,
now my list is over. I know. I should have brought like 65 more.
No, I'm just kidding. The big story from that, though, is that Hong Kong, it's a country. It's not just a style of film. There's numerous genres of film. There is numerous different cultures within the cinema and within the decades that they've been doing this. There's so much to discover, and when you hear about something coming out from Eureka, that doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same as a Neon Eagle video release or anything like that. Many times they're not even going to be remotely similar.
They won't even be. It won't even feel like the same thing. Yeah. And so there's so many good dramas too. I realized I didn't put any dramas on my list, but like the Wong Kar-wai movies and like Boat People and Comrades, Almost a Love Story, and like all that stuff. And the Hong Kong movies that were most popular in Hong Kong, from everything I've been told, obviously I'm not from Hong Kong, but like from everything I've been told, are the comedies.
Yep.
Which are, and not like the ones we see over here, but just like kind of like, I don't know what you would compare them to, like Adam Sandler or Jim Carrey type of movies. I don't know, but like those are like those types of comedies, like the Karl Maka and like the Hui brothers and like that kind of stuff is what was huge at the box office for years. And I mean, there's the Hong Kong movies from the 50s, which I didn't talk about at all on this list, which I've barely seen any of because I don't think a lot of those are subtitled.
No, unfortunately not at this point.
Yeah, like the Wong Fei-hung movies and like that kind of stuff. Yeah, so.
A lot of these, as you just mentioned, they've got that comedic touch, and I'll throw out again, a lot of these commentators, they understand the differences in, comedic styles from 1984 to 2023 are not the same. So when they come in and they explain, he specifically used this word because at this time it was funny because of this, and completely changes the movie for you. Just reading the subtitles, quite often that's not enough to actually get why some of these things are funny or why it's in the movie.
Like the puns, especially. Yeah, there's so many puns. And that's what I love about Frank's commentary tracks. He'll be like, he's saying this, but it's a reference to this other thing. Yeah, you learn so much about the film. And honestly, people are sometimes surprised. Like when I talk to people who speak Cantonese, they're surprised that I like the comedy so much because they know how much I'm missing.
Right.
But I still like what I'm seeing, even though I'm missing a ton of it, right? So,
Exactly.
but yeah, the wordplay is, and I mean, I just love like Richard Ng, like Richard, I think it's pronounced. My pronunciation is horrible, and I apologize. Who's the guy with the big mustache, and like, he's just so funny to me. Just his face, like I laugh when I see him, and so I love those movies. But yeah, there's so much to discover, and there's so many labels putting them out. It's just a really cool time to be a fan of these films.
Yeah, and that's I will forever promote that this is a great time to have seen nothing and have the entire world in front of you, because it is ripe for discovery right now. And discovery in general, you went to film school. What got you into film in the very beginning?
I mean, if we go all the way back to when I was a kid, I just loved movies. The first movie that I was like obsessed with, if you want to call it that, was the Tim Burton Batman movie, with the Michael Keaton one, which came out when I think I was 6. It was 1989. Yeah, so I was 6. So I saw that movie in theaters, and I was just like obsessed with it. I had the toy, I had like the shirt. I remember the hats. They made the hats with the bat insignia on them, and everything. I was obsessed. And then I just loved movies. Like I saw Terminator 2 when I was probably too young to see Terminator 2. And I was like, This is the best movie ever. And like Kindergarten Cop, I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger. So like I loved Kindergarten Cop. And what else did I love when I was a kid? I mean, just like I saw everything. The Ninja Turtles movies I thought were awesome. And those Harrison Ford, the Jack Ryan movies? I thought, like Patriot Games. Yeah, I like that movie a lot. It was just a weird movie to like when you're a kid, right? It's like
a little bit,
yeah. But I saw that movie on VHS, and I really liked it, like Seagal and like that kind of stuff. But when I got like really serious about wanting to make movies and like go to film, because I went to film school for grad school. That's a whole, like I could talk for hours about all the tangents my life has taken. But we moved, like I said, I'm originally from New Jersey. I think I mentioned this, and then moved up to Vermont. So Vermont is a very, very small place, right? And so I'm, as an outsider, coming in at 15 years old with all these people who like they didn't just grow up together. They're like mostly related to each other. Like people are people's cousins and second cousins, or their moms or cousins, like all this stuff, right? Like everyone knows everyone. And so it was like a little bit awkward before I got settled and like kind of started making friends. And so I would just hang out at the video store and I would rent tons of movies. And I got like one of the movies that really like blew my mind at that age was Hate, the French film, which I think is called, I don't speak French, La Haine, which Matthew Kossovitz is in. Yeah. Yep. And like I saw that movie and it just like blew my mind. Then I saw like Pulp Fiction and whatever, like Train Spotting and like those types of movies.
Train Spotting is so good.
That movie was a huge influence on me. And then, like Boogie Nights, and then Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels came out, and Fight Club, and The Matrix. And like I was seeing all those movies and I just became obsessed. And when I was a senior in high school, I took this class that was like this special course offered so my high school was attached to a vocational center, because in Vermont, especially at that time, I think more so even like in decades before that, and the vocational center was like a holdover kind of thing, people wouldn't go to college, right? They would get a job, they would train for a job, and then they would go into a profession, basically, right? So the vocational center had a lot of practical courses that you could take. Like they had restaurant management, small business management. They had fire and ambulance training and like all this stuff, right? But there was also a theater class. So I took the theater class. So for half of the day, every day, my senior year of high school, I did acting, playwriting, and like that, like the kind of the front-facing creative side of theater. And the morning class was all the back, like the lighting, the set design. I didn't take that class. I took like the performance class. And so I was just really into acting, writing, and people kept telling me at that time, like my theater teacher, and then I would do theater through that class, but I would also do theater through my school. So I kind of had like 2 theater teachers.
Wow.
And everyone told me, you at some point, because I did so much acting, they're like, at some point, based on your personality, you're going to be a writer or a director because you want to try to control everything. That's what they told me. Right? So I just got this idea in my head that like, oh, okay, I should be a writer or a director. And so I really wanted to go to film school for undergrad. I was like obsessed with the idea of going to NYU, to Tisch, right?
Nice.
And I wanted to be like Scorsese and like Spike Lee, and I wanted to go to NYU and like whatever. And my parents basically just talked me out of it because my parents were like big believers in like the liberal arts education, right? Which they both did. And so I ended up going to college and I studied art history and Japanese. So I did get to live in Japan. That was really cool. But anyway, it's like the longest tangent in the history of the world. The point being that I just always loved movies. And when I was in high school, I was taking like these classes in how to make stuff, like how to write plays, how to act. And so I just got really into the craft of movies from the perspective of like writing. And like when I was in high school, I still don't understand how this happened, but Shane Black came to Vermont and did a talk about screenwriting. And it was like a closed talk at a college, but my theater teacher got me in.
Wow.
So I was like 17 and I saw Shane Black talk for like 2 hours or whatever about being a screenwriter and how to make movies and stuff like that. And so I was like really deep into like that world and really wanting to do that. And then I didn't. Obviously, I went to college for something else and I just do it. And then I was in my 20s. This is how I ended up going to film school, to answer your question. And I was a freelance writer at that time, right? For websites and for magazines. I was writing like articles and reviews and stuff, right? And my wife gave me, we were not married at the time, but she gave me these 2 books that were like guides to being like a successful freelance writer, right? And she was like, because at the time I was just kind of taking random assignments. It wasn't really like a career. I was just making enough money to pay rent and stuff like that, right? And I read those books and I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. So I was like, all right, I should go to grad school. And I didn't know if I wanted to go for writing fiction, like writing novels, right? Or for film school. So I actually talked to a family friend. This is a funny story, who is a novelist. He's published, I think, like 5 novels, and multiple books of his have been on the New York Times, like best books of the year list and stuff like that. Right.
Wow.
I talked to him and I was like, so I don't know if I want to go for fiction writing or for screenwriting, for film, whatever. And his advice was, he asked me a question. He was like, do you like movies as much as you like books, basically? Do you like the process of writing as much? And I was like, yeah, I do. And he's like, then you should go to film school because I've published 5 books and I am on the New York Times, whatever list. And I'm a professor. I'm not a writer. Right. Like make money. That was basically his advice. Like if you love them the same, go to the one that will help you make more money. Yep. Because then you won't be embittered. You won't get angry that you can't be a writer all the time and stuff like that. So now the ultimate irony is I go to film school, I fail as a filmmaker, and then totally randomly at my friend's provocation, my friend like pestered me about this, I entered a novel writing contest and I won, and now I have a novel coming out. So it's like I did everything wrong. But like 20 some odd years later, here I am.
Success. How long till the novel drops?
So the tentative release date I have, it's really a window. It's not a release date, is winter of 2024. So it'll be like a year from now, basically. Yeah. So I just had my first editorial meeting with the publishing company. Which was really positive. It went really well. And they gave me like some reference books to read in terms of like style and stuff like that. So, like other novels, basically. They're like, this is really well written. You should read this. And like, because I've spent like the last 10 years doing screenwriting. And now I'm like, I have to switch my brain to because when you write screenplays, basically what you're trying to do is write down images that someone could go and film to make a movie. Right. And when you write the novel, you have to give people the fabric of this. Like, you have to give them everything.
Yep.
So I'm like sitting there at my computer being like, okay, if I were writing a screenplay, I would write this, but how do I write it as a novel? Yeah. So it was a really interesting learning curve to kind of get back into writing that style of stuff. Yeah. So.
I bet. Yeah, that's exciting. Can we know what it's going to be on, or is that still?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's if I'm not mistaken, the website for the contest I entered has like the description of the book on it.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So yeah, it takes place in a fictitious small town in Vermont, and the town has a kind of like this folklore. It's like a legend or a local myth or whatever you want to call it about a monster that lives up in the mountains. And in the 18th century, the monster came down from the mountains and killed like almost everyone in the town. So that's kind of like the backstory.
Nice.
In the present tense of the story is, excuse me, basically really weird stuff starts happening in this town. And the main character is the chief of police. And she starts investigating and was like basically like, this makes no sense, right? And so she has to start considering whether there really is a monster or if there is some explanation for everything that is. So it's the way I described it when I pitched it was, it's like the Coen brothers meets Guillermo del Toro.
Nice.
Because it has like a small town weird comedy, like Fargo type of thing, you know, where like there's like the police officer and like the locals are all kind of like zany and weird and like, but it's also very like monster movie, dark, violent. Like, I'm not going to say whether there is actually a monster, because that's something that you find out eventually when you read the book, but it has that kind of creepy, well, I hope if I did my job correctly, that's that kind of like creepy ambiance. So
very nice. That sounds pretty fantastic.
No, I hope so. I hope people like it.
Well, Coen Brothers plus Del Toro, it's high regard already. So that sounds pretty
I mean, it's like, it's hard for me. It's funny because like when I tell people about the book and I like, if they ask me for details and stuff, because it's like pretty violent in places and they're like, wow, it sounds like really dark. And I'm like, well, it's kind of funny. Because I can't write without being goofy. I don't know, as you can probably tell by this interview, my personality is just kind of goofy, right? So it's like, it's hard for me to be totally serious all the time. So it was actually much to the credit of I guess maybe I did my job well, but I would say much to the credit of the publishing company, like they saw what I was trying to do.
Nice.
And they like what I was trying to do. Because a lot of times the feedback I get on my scripts that I've submitted, and like, I have a script that's like, it was optioned by a producer that was kind of like shopped around for a while. And like the criticism that I got of it, which is common of my work in general, is like, it's funny, but it's not like, the material does not lend itself to humor, but it's funny. So it's like, it's weird. Like, we don't know what it is. It's too awkward. Yeah.
It's like, have you heard of dark humor? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is it's weird because like, yeah, it's goofy but dark at the same time. Yeah, it's like the Marx Brothers if they made like Requiem for a Dream. I don't know if that's.
Oh my god! I want to see that movie so bad. Wow.
Yeah, it's like, so I can understand it. It's like when I talk to people, I like it's a lot easier to understand tone face to face, right? Or if you know someone, right? So I kind of do this thing where like I go back and forth between being serious and funny without any kind of indication. So if people don't know me, then sometimes they're like, I can't tell if you're being serious right now.
Right.
So when you do that in writing, like, I totally understand that if you're a reader who would be unfamiliar with me, you'd be like, I don't get it. Like, am I supposed to be laughing at this or not? And so it was really, really nice to have this meeting with the publishing company and to have the guy who's actually the head of the company, like the CEO, was talking about how funny he thought it was. And I was like, okay, success. Finally, after all of these years of people being confused by me, someone other than me thinks it's funny. Yeah. So.
Yay, I can print a novel and then be a professor.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. That'll be my next. I don't even have to leave the university, right? I'll just move from one job to the other one.
In all seriousness, I hope it's wildly successful. The scripts, have you gotten anything made?
No. So the closest, I'm trying to think of like if any of my scripts did anything. Well, there was so the script that was optioned by a producer. Interestingly enough, to go way back to the beginning of our conversation, I told you I went to the New Hampshire Film Festival with a friend of mine who's a producer. So that's the producer who optioned this pilot I wrote. And according to her, obviously I'm not going to the meetings. Like, she's going to the meetings and presenting the material, right? According to her, Hulu was really, really interested in it. But for like certain kind of social political reasons, they were like, I don't know exactly how to explain it without like talking about stuff that I don't really want to talk about. Right. Not in like a bad way. I just like, I don't want to court controversy. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, but they liked the material, but they weren't sure whether it was like a viable kind of commercial thing for them, essentially.
That makes sense.
And so that's probably the closest. Although one thing that happened to me was, Jesse Johnson, the filmmaker, who did like Triple Threat with like Tony Jaa. Yeah. And he's done like Scott Adkins movies and stuff like that. So he and I've never met him, but we know like some of the same people because I was a script reader for like 7 years for Lionsgate. So I would provide coverage on scripts for this. So like I read John Wick, like, I don't know, almost 10 years ago, I think. Before Keanu Reeves was attached, and it was going to be like a straight to demand, like trashy, like low budget action movie.
Right.
And then Keanu Reeves wanted to do it, and the budget went way up. And but so he and I know some of the same people because he's made movies for Lionsgate. So he and I ended up becoming friends on Facebook. And he posted this thing on Facebook during the pandemic where he was like, I have a producer who has a budget. I need a script that will meet pandemic filming regulations. So I wrote one in like 7 days.
Oh, wow.
And I sent it to him. And he was like, oh, this is great. Thanks. But they changed their mind. It's like, so I mean, who knows if he actually read it or if he's just being polite. He's probably just being polite. Right.
Yeah.
But that was a fun exercise. So like, there's been like, I mean, that's the kind of the nature of the beast is like, there's all these moments where you get really close to success. And then like, so another example would be like a friend of mine was the assistant to a producer and a director of sitcoms at Fox. Right. And they were doing a Mini Driver show. I can't remember what it was. She had a sitcom like relatively recently. I don't know. I'm not like a big TV person, but she was on like some show. And so this person who was my friend's boss was the executive producer and the main director on that show. And so that show was kind of coming to a close. And my friend's boss said to my friend, if you have any friends who are writers, I need sitcoms because I need my next round of material to pitch to the studio. Right. So this friend of mine solicited a script from me and brings it into her, and I think there may have been like some preliminary conversations, and then the woman who was the producer director, she's English. I think someone in her family passed away, and she's like, I'm going to move back to England. So that's kind of like that's been my experience basically of like dealing with these things and like so
Hollywood.
Yeah. I actually had one script. Well, maybe I shouldn't talk about this.
The Mini Driver thing, it sounds like it was Speechless, maybe.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. It was that show. Yeah. So my friend was on that show. I actually got to walk around the set of that show. It was interesting because I don't know if this is interesting to people, but like I think there was like a backyard set that was part of that show, but there was also a school and they were attached to each other. So you can't tell in the show, but like you walk down the hallway of a school and it ends in a backyard. It was kind of it was pretty fun to like go onto the soundstage and like walk around. Yeah.
Nice.
I had another script that I'm remembering now was I met a woman who was an aspiring producer. She worked at the Academy. And so she knew everybody through her job. Right. And so I had this script that she wanted to, I think she may have even talked to Antoine Fuqua about it. Fuqua, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but she's friends with him. That's right. Yeah, and she was friends with Spike Jonze or Spike Lee rather, excuse me, and all these people. And she was interested in pitching this script to them, but there were kind of reasons beyond the material that it didn't end up materializing. But I mean, that's just kind of been the nature of my experience with these things. Yeah. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, you've lived like an illustrious life already, and seems to have a lot in front of you. The Facebook group will be linked below. The YouTube channel will be linked below. Everything will be there. Other than the novel, anything coming up soon that you want to highlight for anybody?
is there anything else? I mean, that's like the main thing I'm really working on. So, yeah. I mean, thanks people for watching. Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun. So I'm glad anyone cares at all. I'm sorry I talked for too long.
God, no. That's exactly what this channel's been about, especially lately.
Yeah.
The channel, I did want to throw out again that it's great. It is an instrumental way for people to dive deep into these releases, but also just get into the actual films themselves, which for Hong Kong films, that doesn't happen all that often. So it's nice to have somebody like you that knows their shit.
Well, I mean, it's very kind of you to say. I'm sometimes, I feel like a total novice sometimes on that channel because, like people will come on and be like, they know so much that I could never know. And it's just,
Right.
I just feel like I'm lucky to even be here. And I mean, in a way I'm lucky that it was almost like a totally random thing that I picked Hong Kong cinema, like as opposed to like, I could have done, because I love Japanese movies too, right? So I could have done like Asian cinema, or I could have done like world cinema. I think it was just kind of this random thing that I picked Hong Kong. And then all these releases started coming out. It's still kind of all the coincidences that piled up. Yeah, it's still kind of strange to me, but it's been amazing to do it. And I thank everyone so much for like watching, for caring, for commenting. So it's an exciting time to be involved in this kind of stuff.
That's good. Well, thank you. Again, it's a crazy honor to have you on here. I've been watching for quite some time, and I'm just glad to have met you.
Well, it's an honor. I mean, it's an honor for me to come on here too. I remember watching you and was it Flip Otaku? You've had him on a bunch of times, right?
Yeah, we do a show every other Tuesday together.
Yeah, so I remember commenting on one of your videos live, and now here I am. It's like, yeah, it's kind of surreal. It's like being on Johnny Carson.
Well, thank you. I will happily share this everywhere. Obviously, this will be in the Facebook group, so if you're there, say something, make a comment, and yeah, we'll hang out and grow that community.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Yay,
we'll see you
thank you.
soon.
Bye.